a retired Vice Admiral with the U.S. Navy whose period of active service started in 1977. He transitioned to the reserve component in 1983. Selected for flag rank in 2002, he has served in reserve component flag billets in the Pacific and North Region Midwest, including Reserve Deputy Commander and Chief of Staff, U.S. Pacific Fleet. He was called to active duty as a Deputy Chief of Navy Reserve in October of 2007. Additionally, he served on the Secretary of Defense Reserve Forces Policy Board from August of 2006 to July of 2008. In 2008, Debbink became the Chief of Navy Reserve on the staff of the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. I would like to welcome up Vice Admiral Dirk Debbink.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everybody for this opportunity to address you for a few minutes this morning. I do want to start out addressing and acknowledging again our Gold Star families. Thank you for being here. We have a saying, none of us serves alone, and those of us that do serve, we know the greatest burden is upon those we leave behind when we're serving, and there's no burden greater than the one that you will carry for the rest of your life. Thank you for being here. To Gary Wetzel, my good friend Gary, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to see you, and I'm glad you're able to make it out today. Thank you for being here, Gary. Awesome. Governor Evers, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Of course, Congressman Scott Fitzgerald, it's great to see you here. And Dan Carver, we just met today, but welcome back home, and welcome to the ranks of the retired senior officers. Awesome. So back in 1959, there were about 1,000, we called them military advisors in Vietnam. By 1973, there have been 2.7 million, mostly men, but some women, who served in country in Vietnam. You already know the numbers on the wall behind us. 58,200 never made it back. I was not one of them that went to Vietnam. I graduated in 1973, just as we were withdrawing all of our troops. In fact, January and February of '73 was Operation Homecoming. We brought home some 591 prisoners of war. My father-in-law was there, however, in 1967 to '68. He flew the F-105. Anybody who is a Air Force retiree or veteran knows about the THUD. There were 833 of them produced for the Vietnam War. 382 were shot down. That's 46%. So my wife will tell the story that on the Air Force base where they lived, there were 3 homes. One was shot down, one was a prisoner of war, and one made it back. Fortunately, Jack made it back. In addition to the 58,000 names behind us, there's another somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 who died in the following 2 decades from war injuries, either seen, visible, or unseen. I'd like to compliment Joe Dean. Joe, I saw you earlier. There you are, roaming around back here. Joe and Jane Dean are the founders of Honor Flight. Many of you know Honor Flight, and because of Honor Flight, we were able to take many of our veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the wall, if they would go, right? But many are unwilling to go or unable to go. And so we bring the wall of healing to them here. I just wanted to say a few things about the unseen wounds of war. Today we call it post-traumatic stress. And I purposely left off the D, the disorder, because it's not a disorder, as any of you know who've been in combat. Every one of us would experience some type of post-traumatic stress if we served under the conditions that those who serve in any of our conflicts were required to serve at the behest of our nation. In the Civil War, they called it the DeCosta syndrome. In World War II, we called it shell shock. We called it battle fatigue. We call it the Gulf War syndrome. We call it the post-Vietnam syndrome. As the Chief of Navy Reserve, I saw it firsthand because during my 4 years, I sent some 25,000 Navy sailors, first to Fort Jackson to train them to be soldiers, General, and then we sent them over to the sandbox, we called it, Iraq and Afghanistan. Many came back better for their experience because they found they were able to help others in need. But many came back with not only visible but invisible wounds. And we did our best to reintegrate them into life back to the United States. It's not easy. Anybody's been over there, you leave this war-torn desert, and you usually fly in a military air to some place like Kuwait, and you jump on a commercial flight, and then you circle over Dulles and you look down onto perfectly manicured lawns and roads with curbs and gutters, and it's like, how can these two places exist on the same planet? But they do. And so we did our best back then to reintegrate them through our returning warrior workshops. We did our best by visiting our sailors, and there are many, many soldiers in what we called medical holding units that originally were set up because they complained of illnesses or they complained of aches and pains, and pretty soon the doctors were saying, just go home, you're fine. Well, they were not fine. They were not fine. And we needed to learn that, and then we needed to figure out how we could help them through this time. There's a new organization that I want to highlight Joe Dean once again, that he's standing up here in southeastern Wisconsin, called BRAVE, Building Resilience and building resilience among veterans and emergency responders. There we go. New organization to specifically address the needs of our veterans and first responders who are experiencing post-traumatic stress, because it's not a disorder. So why do we need a wall that heals? We need a wall that heals because many of our veterans are unable or unwilling to go to Washington, D.C. If you know a veteran who is still able, please encourage them to do so. Volunteer to be their guardian. Take them to Washington, D.C. Our honor flight here in southern Wisconsin has already taken over 10,000 veterans there, and many thousands of them from Vietnam. One more time, an applause for Joe and Jane Dean for standing up. So this wall that heals is being brought to us, and as I reflected on what we're doing this morning, what the wall does, you know, the wall doesn't heal anything. What heals is the connections that will all form around this wall for the next couple of days while it's here. Just like in Washington, D.C., most likely in solemn silence as we walk the wall, you can't help but do so in D.C. as you descend down into the well, or here as you walk along the wall and you see the panels, the thousands of names rising alongside of you. And then it's the conversations that will occur after that experience, after that solemn experience. That's what I believe will help us heal. So before it's too late, before this greatest generation, the Vietnam greatest generation, is no longer with us, please take time to honor them all. And it's my hope that the conversations around this memorial will promote important healing here in Waukesha County and throughout Wisconsin. Thank you so much for being here.